Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most crucial, yet often invisible, pieces of the modern internet, JSON. So, have you ever stopped to think about how all the apps on your phone actually work? How does your weather app magically pull up today's forecast? Or how does your social media feed just keep loading new posts? Well, for all those different programs and servers to exchange information without getting confused, they need a shared language. It's kind of like a universal translator, right? Something simple enough that we humans can glance at it and get the gist, but also super structured so that machines can understand it perfectly every single time. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to cover what JSON is, break down its basic structure, see where it pops up in the real world, talk about some common mistakes to avoid, and then wrap up with how we can enforce the rules with something called JSON Schema. All right, first things first, what exactly is this universal translator for data? Okay, so the full name is JavaScript Object Notation. Now, I know what you're thinking, JavaScript? But don't let the name fool you. Even though it was inspired by JavaScript, it's a totally language-independent format. You'll find it being used pretty much everywhere with any programming language you can think of. See, before JSON really took off back in the early 2000s, the web relied heavily on something called XML. And let me tell you, XML was, well, it was a lot more verbose, a lot more complex. And this slide shows you exactly what I mean. Just look at the difference. On the left, you've got XML with all its opening and closing tags. It's a lot of extra baggage. But then look at the right. That's JSON. It's so much cleaner, right? It's compact, it's way more readable, and it just gets straight to the point. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. How is this stuff actually built? The good news is understanding the grammar of JSON is super simple. It really just boils down to two main concepts. The absolute foundation of all JSON is the key-value pair. That's it. The best analogy is a dictionary. The key is the word you're looking up, and it's always a string in double quotes, and the value is the definition, the actual piece of data you care about. Okay, so concept number one is the JSON object. Your signal for an object? These guys, the curly braces. Anytime you see them, just think a collection of details about one single thing. So like in this example, we're describing a person. We've got a key for name, a key for age, and one for married. All that together wrapped in curly braces makes up one JSON object. And concept number two is the JSON array. The visual cue here, square brackets. It's really simple. If an object is for describing one thing, an array is for a list of things, just an ordered collection. So think about a list of hobbies like we have here, or maybe a list of comments on a post. That's a perfect use case for an array. So those values we keep mentioning, they can be one of these 6 basic types. You've got your strings, which is just text, numbers, true or false booleans, and null for when there's no value. But here's where it gets really powerful. A value can also be another object or another array. This means you can nest these things inside each other, letting you build some really rich, complex data structures. It's like building with Legos. Okay, so we know the grammar, but where do we actually see this stuff in the real world? This is where it gets fun. Let's look at JSON in the wild. By far, the most common place you'll find JSON is in APIs. That stands for Application Programming Interface, which is just a fancy way of saying it's how different software components talk to each other. So your app needs data. It sends a request to a server. The server grabs the data, packages it up neatly into a JSON string, and sends it right back. Your app then unwraps that JSON and knows exactly what to do with it. And here's a perfect real-world example. This is actual data from an API from Thailand's Department of Disease Control. You can see right away it's an array. See the square brackets? And inside that array is an object with all this data. And look how easy it is to read. You don't need to be a programmer to guess what new case or new death means. It's just clear, structured information. But it's not just for APIs. Not by a long shot. JSON is also the go-to format for configuration files. If you've ever worked on a web project, you've definitely seen a package.json file. It's also huge in the database world. Modern NoSQL databases like MongoDB are literally built to store data in a format that's basically JSON, which makes them super fast and flexible. Now, because JSON is so strict with its rules, it's also incredibly easy to break. One wrong comma, one misplaced bracket, and the whole thing can fall apart. So let's talk about the etiquette of JSON and go over the most common mistakes so you don't have to learn them the hard way. Yeah, these are the big ones. the absolute top offenders that trip up everyone, from total beginners to seasoned pros. A single character out of place can cause a total failure, so it's worth knowing these like the back of your hand. Okay, error number 1, and this is probably the biggest one: incorrect quotes. A lot of people, especially if they're used to JavaScript, will try to use single quotes or no quotes at all for the keys. You can't do that. In JSON, the rule is simple and absolute. Keys must be in double quotes, period. No exceptions. And here is the other classic mistake: the trailing comma. See that little comma after the last item? In a lot of other programming languages, that's totally fine. But in the world of strict JSON, that's a big no-no. It will break your parser. Just remember, the last item in a list or an object doesn't get a comma after it. Okay, so you've mastered the syntax. You're sending and receiving JSON. But how do you guarantee that the data you're getting is, well, correct? What if someone sends you an age as a string instead of a number? That's where the rulebook comes in. That's where we talk about JSON schema. I love this analogy because it makes so much sense. Think of your actual JSON data as the final meal, the delicious thing you're about to consume. Well, the JSON schema is the recipe. It's the set of instructions that defines exactly what ingredients you need, what they should look like, and how they all go together. It ensures your meal comes out perfect every single time. So let's look at a simple schema. This says, hey, the data I'm expecting has to be an object. Then, under Properties, it lays out the rules. It says there should be a name property, and its value has to be a string. There can also be an age, which must be an integer. And then, see that required array at the bottom? It says name is required, but age isn't listed, so age is optional. This is basically a contract for your data, protecting your app from getting bad or incomplete information. So there you have it. From the weather on your phone to the shows on your streaming service, JSON is that invisible language holding all the web's conversations together. It's simple, it's elegant, and it allows this incredibly complex world of applications to communicate seamlessly. Now that you understand the language, the real question is, what are you going to build with it?